Hi guys, it's Jason here from Godlike Productions once more, and just gonna run through a video of a little bit more of the studio setup. And I thought I'd do something a little bit different this time and just, give a little bit of audio commentary as we go, rather than, sticking some old songs over it or letting it play silent. So the objective really of this session in the studio is to try and get the audio patch bay in this rack set up, and also get the speakers hooked up and set up. So what I'm doing at the moment is redoing basically the entire of that patch bay. I used to have the i88Xs connected and those are gone, and I wanted to change how I had the audio channels laid out. What I used to have is I had them basically ganged as stereo pairs, with one with left above right, but I've changed that, so now I've got the outs above the ins. So basically the patch bay set up now, so I've got 8 audio I/O from the H9000, because I can then route those either through MADI or I can route them through USB into either of the two computers. So there's two computers that can be run. One of them is the MacBook Pro, and the other one is my main Xeon based Windows computer that does really the heavy lifting. And both of them, the H9000 will be accessible to both of those, as well as the ADAT channels as well. So the H9000 really is acting as a little bit of a hub. Next to those, I've got the UFX3. I've got all the audio channels there, and I've got it set up for a couple of audio channels for the MADI face, so I'm not sure. I haven't run them yet. I don't run them here. I'm not sure if they'll end up there. And then I've got the O1X at the end, so I've got inputs into there and a pair of outputs, and the final ones will be the amp. So this is really just me pulling out a bunch of cables that are no longer used and readdressing the new ones. I think I'm sort of up to the point there where I'm running the main audio outputs, which are going to feed the speakers. And again, I have to rethink the speakers a little bit. I've now got 2 sets of monitors on the desk, which I don't know how I've managed to do it, but I've got more monitoring than I had previously. So I'm running with my main monitors are JBL LSR 4300 series. So I have the 12-inch powered sub, and then I've got 8-inch main monitors, and then I've also got some iAudio small monitors, which I use for my travel rig, but they sound really, really good, and they give a sort of different perspective on the detail of the music, which is quite good. They've got a little bit less bass in them, and so it's a little bit easier to concentrate on some of that high-end stuff, though. They're both pretty capable speakers, and to be honest, for the tone that they, both the speakers cover, they sound pretty similar, which I think is a really good thing from audio monitors, because that's what you want. So you can sort of see in this rack, it is pretty tight in there, and just getting everything lined up. The top, the top patch bay is probably the most important one. I think this cable here I end up giving up. So this is a cable. I remake this a little bit later in this video. That's the cable for the DM Pro that runs over to the DSP-5D. I was getting super frustrated at this stage because this cable was, about 30 centimeters or about a foot too short to reach. So it's quite annoying. But I'm sort of finding that with a lot of the audio cables is that because, the geography of the studio's changed, the layout or I guess the geometry more so than the geography. But the layout of the studio's changed, and so the cables that I used to use just no longer, fit, because a good chunk of the cables were all custom made for the old studio. So I'm gonna have to go through and repeat the exercise here a little bit. But tis what it is. This, should hopefully be my home for at least the next 5 years, and so I may as well, set things up properly and get them running. I'm finding it much more of a struggle in this studio, keep the cables tidy. There's just not, I don't have the same access to the cabling behind the racks as I used to. But I'm going to have to spend a day or two, I think, at the end, just going through building the looms, and just routing things as neatly as I can. So I'm not sure where we're up to at the moment, but I think I've finished all the cabling of the rack for now. So that patch bay setup, I do make some changes a little bit later. So this is going back probably 3 weeks ago when I recorded this video. I now only just got around to editing it, but yeah, I had to sort of think about things and change the layout a little bit. Also, there was a problem with one of the patch bay channels. There's some dry solder joints on it, so I'm not sure if that was done by Neutrik. Oh, this, I've got main studio speakers going up, so the sub's already plugged in and set up, and these are the two main monitors. I think this is coming to the end of this day's work. So those monitors need networking and the audio cable. So the audio gets routed into the subwoofer, and then the subwoofer distributes it. So there's pretty much that's the main management, and it can also do the filtering of the subwoofer. So you can turn that on and let the sub manage that. Alright, this is cable making time. So blessed with some beautiful weather out here. So set up a table outside, nice weather, and basically what I'm doing here is pulling out the old DM Pro cables. So they are unbalanced inputs to XLR outputs to hook into the DSP-5D. And yeah, basically I wanted to use the parts off the old ones I had. I don't use unbalanced cables very much, so I'm reusing the old unbalanced jacks on this, and I'll leave the XLR male ends on the cables, and I'll set them up again as proper balanced cables, because I've got to run all the post-processing gear yet, all the preamps, EQs and compressors, and that cable will be very useful for that. So it's going to be an application where it can hook into the DSP-5D directly from there. So I'll leave the end on, and later on I'll go and pop another XLR end on that. So yep, you see my cable making technique at 8 times speed. It takes a little while, but yeah, it's worthwhile. I always know the cables, are made to a spec that I like. I always use Neutrik connectors and Kinnair cable. So I want these cables to last a long time without having to redo them. And I put heat shrink on for the labelling as I go through and do them. That one there, it's been a little while since I made a cable. I forgot to put the sleeve on the end. And I'd already started soldering on the jack connector, so fortunately I hadn't done the other end, so I managed to thread that on. So I think the important thing here is, if you're making your own cables, make sure you get a good flux. It really makes a huge difference when you're, need to solder the cables, get joints together. Make sure you pre-tin your pre-tin the cables as you go. You'll see that every now and then down on the wooden chopping board that I've got there, a bit of protection for the table. You'll see I measure stuff up against the bottom left corner of that. I have some marks on there for, you can see I'm doing it now. Just some marks that I've made for how long to strip the XLR cables, how long to strip jack cables, and how long to strip the internal conductors. The Kinnear cable is really good, but one of the things that's a bit of a pain is unweaving the shield. It's a really, really good shield, but to do these ends is a bit tricky. What I found is most effective, I've just got, you see the orange tool, not the one right in the foreground, but the one that's behind my arm at the moment. It's just like a point as the end of it's bent, and I'm not sure what it's called, but I just found it's the quickest and most useful way to undo that braid, and then I can tin it up and trim down the ends to fit into the XLR. I'm sure if I do these more often I get a little bit quicker at it, but it's for me it's definitely quality over quantity, so I'd much rather take a little bit extra time, just make sure I get everything soldered in. What I really need to do, I need to make myself up a little jig to plug XLR on it and cables in. I did use the cable tester, but I sort of got melted one of the knobs a little bit, so I try not to do that anymore. But I just basically need something with female and male XLRs and some jacks on there, so that I can hold them when when I'm soldering, rather than having to rely on the little hands from a soldering station there. Because while they're good for holding cables, they're not so good for holding the jacks and the XLRs while you're trying to solder on it, because just that little bit extra pressure. You saw my high quality heat shrinker there, old hairdryer. So it's on the to-do list is to buy a better heat gun that I can probably use for, I can also use for surface mount stuff in the future. That's that little tool I'm using I was talking about. Getting rid of all that, the cotton bits there is a little bit annoying. It's like a little bit of buffering inside the, protection inside the cable. The Kinnear cables are really well built, and once you've set them up properly and you've got good, good connectors and solder joints, they really are, very quiet and transparent, which is good. I haven't had problems with them. I've had a lot more problems with commercial cables. I used to buy Horizon cables, which had a pretty good name, but I had a few of those fail on me. It's just basically the insulators broke down in the middle, and so the shield was contacting the conductor on the inside, and I took the ends off, and basically all the internal insulator had perished. Using a little bit of isopropyl alcohol to rub off all that flux in the end, try and keep them a little bit cleaner. Something I didn't used to do, but it's more into the habit of it now. One of the other things I will probably do on future cables, or I have done them in a few, is put a little bit of heat shrink around the the ground, the braided ground, because it's not insulated up to the tip. It hasn't really been a problem because they are fairly stiff within those connectors, but just to ruggedise them a little bit more. So something that I will probably get back into the habit of doing is just putting a little bit of heat shrink around that one, just set one conductor and make sure that there's little, reduce the risk of it shorting to the, the casing of the ground or to another conductor in there. Another benefit of doing it outside is I don't have to deal with all the smoke from the soldering. It's sort of, it's really airy, so doesn't get, doesn't end up in my lungs. It's not the best stuff to be breathing in. So yeah, being outside, being able to do your soldering out there is quite good from that perspective. So a little bit of trivia for you about me. I think my first introduction to soldering iron was when I was 8. Well, I messed that cable up. I got the 2 conductors around the wrong way. My guide has red and blue conductors, but the cable I've got's got red and white. Got blue and white. And yeah, usually I put white is hot and blue is cold, but sometimes I sort of forget that and I put blue as the active, or blue as a hot, which is what I did in this case, and yeah, it's annoying. Had to redo it a little bit. So yeah, I learnt to solder when I was 8. I used to go to a academic extension program, and yeah, wanted to learn about electronics, so got a pretty early start at soldering. I'm happy to say my skills have improved a lot since then. It's flux was not a common thing that we used back in primary school, but yeah, quality of soldering irons has certainly improved, and I've had a lot more practice in those years, so yeah, much needed job nowadays. Alrighty, cable is, both cables are done pretty much, just got to heat shrink on. So I make my own custom labels, so the way I label them, it's got the source and destination on them, and I have a logo and my phone number on them in case I get lost. People can just sort of ring me up and say, "Hey, I found a cable." So they give a little bit of identity to me. I use a Brother label maker, don't know the model number, but it's a big orange beastie from the P-Touch E550W. It's pretty good. I'm not so keen on the wraparound ones. I'm finding for the lengthwise ones, they don't stick all that well. They come undone, particularly with cables that you use. What I'm doing at the moment there is I'm putting, I have this braid that I got to make up snakes. I find it makes really quite good quality snakes. Lining up the cables underneath it though is a little bit annoying, because I'm a little bit of a perfectionist, and I sort of like the cables to lay nicely next to each other. But yeah, anyway, it comes out and I just put insulation tape on the end, and it makes a really nice good quality loom. This one's only stereo, but again, keeping them a stereo, rather than having cable ties or little velcro things along it, is quite a nice way to do it. Alright, that's the end, and see you guys again soon. Bye.